What you see in front of you are three 8bitdo controllers. They are M30, the Lite 1, and the Lite 2. I purchased these three options to try out emulating retro games on my PC. They all serve slightly different purposes, but I wanted something small, light, and wireless. Let's take a look at all three. The Lite 2 is what I expected to be the best of the bunch here, but sadly it was the worst. It has all the same face buttons as you'll see on the Lite 1, as well as Start, Select, and the Mode switch. It's awesome that it has flared triggers on the rear, but they're more just flat buttons instead of actual triggers. The D-pad is also extremely poor. These drop-in, squared-off D-pads that are being used in many budget handhelds and controllers are really just awful. You can see they don't fit properly in the shell, the travel is way too far, and they're very hard to press. The entire D-pad feels like it's being pushed down, and it feels loose and sloppy. And even though this controller does have two joysticks, they are even worse than this cheap Switch Lite ones. The travel is just so minute. I mean, it hits 100% input pretty much immediately on all sides, and this causes wildly inaccurate movement, and it's the same issue on both joysticks. Unfortunately, the Lite 2 feels more like the controller you'd give to a 5-year-old to mess around with while you're actually playing. Really disappointing. Coming off the Lite 2, I was worried that the Lite 1 would be a flop as well, seeing as they are identical shells. But in real-time use, this controller works perfectly for any game not needing 3D movement. With the trigger buttons simply being additional shoulder buttons, the rear shell is completely flat, and surprisingly that makes the controller comfortable and easy to hold. I'm not a huge fan of the chiclet-style R2, L2 buttons, but for emulation you almost never use them anyways. All the face buttons feel good and work well, albeit slightly smaller than I'd like. Both D-pads here suffer similar looseness in the shell, but they're a far improvement to the Lite 2. They're flatter, they have just the right click to not feel quite like keyboard keys, but they're short travel, so you can press them quite fast. The bottom additional 4 buttons are fairly useless for retro emulation, but are still good for menu navigation otherwise. The turbo button is almost flat in the shell, while the power button has a slight chamfered edge, so you can tell the difference. And on all three controllers, you also get 4 blue connection LEDs on the bottom when powered on. The Bluetooth connection on all three of these controllers is also great. There's no lag whatsoever. And overall, the Lite 2 is really my 1A choice of the three options here, and easily the most comfortable. And the M30 here is really the dark horse winner. Having never used a 6-button controller, I was quite skeptical at first, but the fit and quality of this product is really unmatched for the price. The D-pad is possibly the best one I've ever used. I mean, it has no play at all. It feels super precise and responsive. You know, the face buttons are big and easy to press, with just the right amount of travel and feedback. And while I'm not a huge fan of the mini XYZ buttons, they're still usable and fairly easy to press. I like the large L and R shoulder buttons up top, and your L2 and R2 buttons are actually C and Z outside of a Sega console. You will definitely need to remap controls here, since most games aren't really meant to be used with 6 face buttons. And on the rear, it has a slight hand contour, but otherwise remains fairly rounded on all sides. The only issue I really have with this controller is a personal problem. Unfortunately, this controller causes me fairly severe carpal tunnel pain, especially compared to the Lite 2. Even after like 1 to 2 hours of usage, my hands were sore for 48 hours, which is a real shame, because this would be the best controller out of the three. I like it more than the Lite 1, even. But I want to know your thoughts on all three of these controllers. Do you also love the M30? Is the Lite 2 actually working the best for you, or maybe the Lite 1 fits your needs the most? Put them down in the comments, and thanks for watching.